A new book offers advice for starting and advancing in the accounting profession. This is the IssuesWatch podcast. Hi, I'm Don Meyer, Chief Marketing Officer at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to the IssuesWatch podcast. With us today is Jerry Maginnis. He is a CPA, an executive in residence at Rowan University, and a former KPMG Philadelphia office managing partner. He's also the author of a new book entitled Advice for a Successful Career in the Accounting Profession: How to Make Your Assets Greatly Exceed Your Liabilities. Spoiler alert, stick around until the end of this episode to receive a discount on the book. Welcome, Jerry.
Hey, thank you, Don. Great to be with you this morning.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. First, congratulations on writing a book. That is no small feat. So congratulations on that before we get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Appreciate that.
Before we get into the book, tell us a little bit about your career and what you've been up to since you retired from KPMG.
Sure, Don. So, I spent my career at KPMG in the Philadelphia office. I was an audit partner there. Towards the end of my career, I had the opportunity to get into some leadership roles. Retired a few years ago, and since that time, I've been doing a number of things. I've joined a couple boards, serving on some audit committees, chairing some audit committees. But one of the things that's really been very interesting and fun to do is I've gotten involved at Rowan University. I live in southern New Jersey in a town called Sewell, which is actually pretty close to Rowan's campus, about 15 minutes away. And so I help out, volunteer there supporting their accounting program and their business school. And they've given me a title of executive in residence. People say, well, what does that mean, Jerry? What exactly does an executive in residence do? And I don't teach classes. I'm not an adjunct faculty member, but I do spend some time in the classroom with the students. So I'll give guest lectures on topics like ethics to the seniors or careers in accounting to the freshmen. And that's really provided an opportunity to meet a lot of students. I've also been chairing their accounting advisory board. So last couple of years, I've been spending maybe 8 to 10 hours a week there. They're kind enough to give me an office, so that's been great. I also am doing some consulting in this next phase.
Okay. And of course, you've also been active with the NJCPA. You're part of our strategic planning committee, so we certainly appreciate that. And by the way, once we have you as a volunteer, we never let you go. So just so you're aware of that.
I'm starting to figure that out.
Yeah,
by the way.
That's right. Yeah, members slowly figure it out, but usually by then it's too late. Yeah. So who or what inspired you to write the book? 'Cause I know, having done some writing myself, staring at the blank page, you need some sort of inspiration to get yourself going. So what inspired you to write it, and who's the book intended for?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It's not something you just do without some sort of catalyst, right? So the catalyst for me was, being involved at Rowan. The students sort of figure out you're there, and they'll ask you if they can come meet with you, and they want to talk about things like getting that first internship, or should I go down a CPA path, or other topics. And so over the years, I've met with dozens and dozens of students, and each one's unique. You try and listen carefully to what's on their mind and tailor your discussion to them. But one day, about 3 years ago, I had a meeting with a student. They walked out of my office, and I leaned back in my chair, and I said, I think that's about the 50th conversation I've had about the 150-hour requirement. And it occurred to me that, maybe there was an opportunity to put some of the advice I was sharing with the students down on paper in a way that could be leveraged more broadly, perhaps beyond Rowan. Maybe there's schools here in New Jersey or really across the country where there's not an executive in residence, or there's not that faculty member that's going to, invest the time with the students to answer their questions or help them out. Or maybe there's a student that's just hesitant to approach someone and ask for the advice. So I thought, getting it summarized in writing might be helpful to some folks out there. In terms of who the book is intended for, when I started writing it, Don, it was definitely focused on that college and university student studying accounting at either a undergraduate or graduate program. But as I got into it, I realized there may also be an opportunity to, provide some advice to what I call early career professionals. I sort of define that as folks in that first 5, 6, 7 years of their career, where maybe there's a time to develop some really good formative habits that are going to serve them for a lifetime. So as the book evolved, arguably the meat of the book is focused on that early career professional. Section 1, which is the college and university student piece, is about 6 chapters. Section 2 on early career professionals is 9 chapters. And there's actually a Section 3, which is a little shorter, that has some advice for folks maybe a little further along in their career.
Right. And that early career section, from an association standpoint, that's where we really see some changes over the last, say, 10, 15 years between what graduates or young professionals used to do 15 or 20 years ago, sort of that public accounting path, and what they're doing now, where they're choosing a lot of different types of paths, and sometimes that has an impact on whether or not they become a CPA or not. So what advice would you give, without giving away too much from the book, so we want people to buy it and read it, but what advice would you give for that young professional who's thinking about taking the exam or becoming a CPA?
Yeah, so this is a conversation I have a lot at Rowan, and the first thing you do is you sort of explain what's required, right? So you need 150 credits versus 120 credits to ultimately become licensed, and of course that's an extra 30 credits, so there's a cost of tuition, there's a cost of time, and then you go on to prepare for and take the exam. You're going to incur some costs there too, right? Prep costs, fees to take the exam. Not to mention the fact that I think the average student is going to invest 300 to 400 hours of time to study for and pass the exam. So after I have that conversation with the students, they look at me and they say, like, well, why would I want to do this, And I talk to them about the return on investment they're going to get, not just for 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, but really for decades, the rest of their career. And I tell my story, which is, I can look them in the eye and say, becoming a CPA, choosing to become a CPA, choosing to invest the time and effort to do that at an early age was one of the best life decisions I've ever made. I've gotten rewards, for decades, not just in terms of financial rewards, but opportunities, chance to operate in a great profession, meet a lot of great people, kind of engage in lifelong learning. So I can look any young person in the eye and highly recommend they go down that path.
Right. Well, I used to speak to students quite a bit at colleges like Rowan, Rutgers, other places, and I used to say it's a safety net, that no matter what happens, and I remember doing some of these talks during the Great Recession and talking to college audiences and saying, listen, this is where all of a sudden every accountant out there says, if they hadn't taken the exam, I wish I had, because it's that safety net that doesn't ensure employment, but it gives you a leg up over others.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a pretty stable profession, and if you have the CPA on top of the accounting degree, I think it makes you even more in demand in good times, bad times, challenging times.
Right, exactly. So I mentioned the volunteer work that you do for the NJCPA. You spoke to our educators a couple of weeks ago, and as part of your presentation, you mentioned research done by the Illinois Society of CPAs. They were looking at the pipeline and some of the challenges in trying to get graduates or young professionals to take the exam. And there were the usual reasons that individuals weren't taking it. There was the time, there was money, as you just mentioned. But one of the things that I hadn't really anticipated was fear of failure, fear of not passing the exam was a bigger factor than the Illinois Society thought, and certainly I thought. So all those conversations you have with students when you talk to them about the benefits of sitting for the CPA exam, does that fear of failure ever come up?
Yeah, great question, Don. I think it does. We're all human, and we all have concerns, fears, apprehension, whatever the right word is. But as we talked about, it's a big investment of time and money, and they probably know or have talked to people, it's a hard exam, let's be honest, who have not been successful. So I think it's daunting enough to go down that path, but then when you factor in the risk that you might not be able to be successful, that can concern certain students and maybe discourage them from even trying. And of course, I try and encourage them to, conquer that fear, right? And we all have to conquer fears in life. And in the book, one of the techniques I use at various places throughout the books is I have these little myth boxes where I try and dispel myths. And one of the myth boxes talks about, the CPA exam is too hard and not worth the effort. And in there, I basically say that's actually not true. There's 500,000 CPAs across this country, so if that many people passed it, you can too. So try and encourage the students to overcome those apprehensions.
Now, in the intro to the book, your colleague Ernie Almonte refers to the profession as a choose-your-own-adventure book. What do you think Ernie had in mind when he used that phrase?
Yeah, Ernie graciously wrote the introduction for me. Ernie and I had a chance to get to know each other when we served on the AICPA Foundation board together. Terrific individual. I think what Ernie, I haven't actually discussed that with Ernie, but I think probably what he was referring to is, and I talk about this in the book when I get into career paths and all the different ways you can use your accounting degree. So obviously there's public accounting, there's private accounting, there's audit, there's tax, there's advisory, there's government, nonprofit. I mean, every industry needs accountants and CPAs, right? There are specialty areas like internal audit or forensic accounting. You could work for the FBI. You can sort of choose your own adventure, right? I think that's what Ernie was alluding to. And of course, many accountants and CPAs go on to be business leaders, Don. CEOs of big company, board members. So you can take that accounting degree. It can take you just about anywhere you choose to go.
Right. Now, do you think the book can be a resource in helping address those pipeline challenge I mentioned earlier? We've been looking at the numbers for accounting enrollments, for graduates sitting for the CPA exam. Now, it's a little hard to kind of gauge the last few years because of the pandemic. Obviously, some things were down because individuals may not have wanted to attend school. They might have taken a break. Of course, sitting for the exam was a challenge for many, many months. So it's hard to look at the numbers of the last sort of 12 to 18 months and make any type of real judgment. But we do know pre-pandemic that the numbers were trending down. So do you think this book or the messages in this book could help state societies, firms, others address some of these pipeline challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think your listeners are probably mostly familiar with this topic, Don, but just as a quick reinforcement, less people sitting for the CPA exam, passing the CPA exam, that trend has been happening, as you described, for at least the past 4 or 5 years, and the drop-offs are not insignificant. Perhaps even more concerning, I was just telling Ralph Thomas this, I mean, over the last 2 weeks, I've probably spoken with a dozen either accounting department chairs or business school deans at universities across the country. And to a person, they've shared with me that their enrollments are down, and down significantly. So not 2, 3, 5%, more like 10, 15, 20% in their accounting programs. So we clearly do have a pipeline challenge. And the book is not a silver bullet that's going to solve that problem, but I think the book definitely could be a resource, a tool to help address that issue. Chapter 1 of the book is entitled Why Accounting is a Terrific Profession, and it lays out all the great reasons that you and I know, but high school students may not know, underrepresented populations may not know, community college students may not know. And it's not just about financial rewards, as we know. Accounting is a profession that enables lifelong learning, a seat at the table when decisions are being made, an opportunity to grow and interact with professionals on the leading edge of American business, whether you're a tax, audit, or advisory professional, or whether you are the CFO or controller of a company.
So how do you think the book can be a resource for folks like me at a state CPA society or a partner at a firm to reach out to those underrepresented groups, to talk to them about the profession and why it's such a great profession?
Yeah, no, I think there is an opportunity there, Don, and one area that I think the opportunity is particularly ripe, and it could be used by a state society, it could be used by firms, it could be used by organizations like the AICPA, and I think historically we haven't focused enough attention there, and this is a byproduct of my experience at Rowan. I would say about 30% of our accounting majors at Rowan come through the community college system. So they'll do 2 years at the local community college, then they'll transfer, graduate with a Rowan degree. These kids, I've met with many of them, they're bright, they're motivated, they're hardworking. The only reason they came through the community college system is because maybe mom and dad couldn't afford $50,000 a year in tuition, so it's a much more cost-effective way to get your education. A lot of them are first-time college students in their family. Many of them are diverse. So a lot of those diverse populations are coming through those community colleges. I know looking back on my time at KPMG, we recruited at more established four-year schools that had maybe well-regarded accounting programs, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think we need, as you described, to expand the net a little bit. One thing I learned in my time in public accounting is, to win in professional services, you need to access the whole talent pool, right? If you're only accessing a part of it, you're not going to get the best talent and retain the best talent. So I think the profession can do better there. The book, I would love to see it deployed at community colleges. Many of them have accounting classes, accounting programs. I've actually spoken at some of the community colleges in South Jersey. And getting down into the high school level, the state societies do that really well. I think the book could be a resource there. The book could be a resource with guidance counselors at the high school level to just be aware of the opportunities in the accounting profession. So a lot of ways to deploy it. I have been speaking with firm leaders at, everyone from the Big Four down to, local accounting firms about maybe using the book in their recruiting programs and their training programs. I chuckle because for years firms go out to campus to recruit students and they bring, t-shirts, hats, water bottles, all kinds of fun stuff, but maybe the book would be a resource that would really help that student, get some valuable information as they plan for their future.
Yeah, a book instead of a water bottle. That might help with the pipeline issue a little bit more. So I know this is not the first interview you've done about this book. So tell me, what has been the reaction to the book so far from colleagues, from students, from your target audience?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. I mean, broadly, Don, the kind of folks that I think may have an interest in the book would be colleges and universities, both the faculty who are teaching the students and the students themselves. But, it's hard to get out and meet with all those students, right? So I've kind of been working through the faculties, the accounting department chairs, the business school deans, and I've had tremendous interest there. A lot of people see it as a resource that they can actually use in the classroom, maybe as a companion piece with some of their accounting classes. It's getting a lot of traction within Beta Alpha Psi and student accounting clubs, organizations like that. I'm going to be speaking actually at Ralph's alma mater to the students, Lehigh University, in the near term. So that channel is working well. The firm channel, again, I think there's been a lot of interest there. Discussion of potentially using the book as a training resource, so that early career professional piece, maybe a giveaway within a training course for those professionals. And then state societies, as I mentioned, and accounting organizations of all kind, AAA, AICPA, I think are looking at the book as a potential resource, whether it be to help with the pipeline issue or in other ways. And then finally, underrepresented populations, I think there's a lot of potential there. And I've been actually having some interesting conversations with some people that work with the inner city public schools in Philadelphia about maybe trying to get the book deployed at the high school level, very diverse populations there. So I've been busy. My wife says to me, I thought you were retired, but I've literally been doing 6, 8, 10 meetings a day. I'm starting to take on a fair number of speaking engagements, and I'm happy to do it. I mean, somebody said to me the other day, what's your speaking fee? And I said, I don't have a speaking fee. I mean, I honestly didn't write the book for financial motivation. I wrote the book to try and just give back and create a resource that would be helpful to this next generation.
Well, CPAs never retire, right? I mean, that's my experience.
It's one of the hazards of the profession, I think.
Yeah. So any final words of wisdom, either for a potential CPA exam taker or even for an existing CPA when they're delivering a message about the exam to a student or a graduate?
Yeah. I have a chapter in the book, Don, that's called Core Values That Are Critical for Every Accountant to Embrace. And it talks about things like, ethics, trust, integrity, doing what you say you're going to do. I think those are core values that maybe we all need to hang on to, right? They're important to learn when you're young, but they're important to never forget. And in that regard, I think the book could potentially be helpful to folks that are actually a little further along in their career, notwithstanding those target audiences of students and early career professionals, as maybe a little bit of a refresher. Some of it definitely would have been things they would have been exposed to and maybe learned, but type of thing, it wouldn't hurt to dust it off. As you say, it's a quick read and maybe reinforce some of those core values that are really critical to our success and our brand.
Right. Well, that's a great point. Yeah, it's not just for early 20-somethings. The average age, I think, of a CPA exam passer is like 28 or 29. So it's never too late. So you can always take a look at a book like this, get inspired, and hopefully go on and take that CPA exam.
You know, on that last point, I honestly didn't target writing it as a motivational book. It was more a book that would just have some lessons learned during my career and some basic information that might be helpful to that young professional or student. But one of the gentlemen who read it, a draft of it, and was kind enough to write an endorsement, described it as a motivational book. So I'll take that. You know, if people get inspired by reading it, I think that would be great.
Never turn down a positive endorsement.
Indeed,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah. Well, Jerry, I want to thank you for joining us here today. It's I can tell you this is the first in-person interview I've done. All the other ones have been through Zoom or some other platform virtually. So I literally dusted off this jacket to do this interview. So we really appreciate you coming in and all this great advice. And I highly recommend to not just prospective CPAs, but also for existing CPAs, whether you're a partner or somebody who works with graduates and students on a regular basis. Read the book. There's great advice in there. And as someone said, it's motivational.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Don. It's been my pleasure to be with you this morning.
Thank you all for listening and watching. As a special offer for NJCPA members, Jerry and his publisher are offering a 40% discount on his book. For more information, go to njcpa.org/career advice book. That's njcpa.org/career advice book.